Hey guys, as some of you know, I'm a huge fan of conspiracy theories and I love looking at them and debunking them and taking them apart. And one of my favorites, the one I wanted to talk to you about today, is about chemtrails. Um, this, for me, on a personal level, is a particularly maddening conspiracy theory because it's so easy to disprove, and to believe it requires a certain amount of scientific illiteracy, which I find hard to believe exists in the world that we have around us today, where we can live in an evidence-based, logical world. And so it blows me away that this is somehow actually not just a fringe theory now, it's actually grown because of the internet, because of YouTube, and because of the way that the theory fits into the human narrative, similar to religion, like a lot of conspiracy theories. They feed into the narrative that you're the one with the insider information. You're the one who has all of the knowledge, that you're going to bust this case wide open before anybody else. And it tends to feed into that a little bit, and it tends to kind of massage the human ego a little bit, which is obviously very dangerous when you're trying to think about rational, logical ideas, is allowing the human ego to creep in. So, over the past few years, I've encountered many chemtrail proponents on my Facebook page, and obviously in real life, as the conspiracy theory has grown in popularity, I have begun to meet actual people who believe in this chemtrail idea. So from what I can understand from the conversations that I've had, the basic premise is this, is that a nefarious government organization, since around the mid-90s, that's usually the beginning date for the chemtrail conspiracy theory. 1995 is sort of the earliest I've seen it. Because this nefarious government organization has been spraying us since the mid-90s with chemicals deployed from the backs of commercial jetliners and presumably military aircraft as well, but the theory seems to center on jetliners. And the evidence for this is that normal contrails dissipate after a few moments, and chemtrails, because they contain more heavy additives, more chemicals, actually linger in the sky much longer and can form these long cloud chains that we see from time to time. Now, of course, anybody who knows anything about science or aircraft knows that that's nonsense. Aircraft produce contrails at high altitudes when they burn hydrocarbons. The hot gases released out of the back of a jet or a turboprop engine then interact with the air, the very, very cold air, at high altitudes, and produce essentially an exhaust trail. You know, it's a contrail. It's condensation. It's hot gases mixing with cold gases. And the length of time that they stay in sky is based on a number of factors. There are literally hundreds of factors that could be acting on vapor trails at 20, 30, 40,000 feet that could affect the rate of dissipation and how long they stay and what shape they take afterwards, if any. So it's not as simple as, oh, the chemicals are heavy, so therefore they spread out. So obviously, the first few times you hear about chemtrails, you kind of think, you can't be serious. Did this person do any science at school? Do they understand anything about atmospherics? Do they understand anything about aircraft? And most of the time they don't. So continuing with our math-based debunking of this particular conspiracy theory, we then have to move on to the chemical itself. So a crop dusting plane uses roughly 7 ounces of agent diluted into 7 gallons of water. That will cover 1 acre of land in the chemical that the crop duster is spraying. So in order to become a people duster, and we want to cover a large area in chemicals, well, for instance, the United States is roughly 2.3 billion acres. So 2.3 billion acres, well, let's factor that up. That would mean you would need to cover the entire United States. You need 120 billion gallons of the chemical to add to the water. That's just the chemical, not the water. And that would mean more chemical than is transported in the entire fleet of oil tankers in the world annually. That's how much 120 billion gallons is, just to put that in perspective for you. So that would mean that the entire fleet of oil tankers in the world would have to all get together for a year in order to carry as much chemical as would be needed to cover the continental United States, 2.3 billion acres. Do the math. A Boeing 747 can carry 250,000 pounds of cargo. That means that in order to dump that much chemical, the government would need to schedule 4 million separate 747 flights to spread their chemicals every week. And that is 18 times more flights, not 747s, 18 times more flights per day than in the entire United States, the busiest place for air travel in the world. So what about the dispersal of the clouds and how they form? On days when cirrus cloud formation is occurring, there is more moisture in the upper atmosphere, and consequently, contrails may linger longer before evaporating. Since cirrus clouds often precede general overcast or haze, the casual observer could easily assume that the contrails have caused the overcast or become the overcast. The persistence of contrails varies with weather conditions. Sometimes they dissipate almost immediately, but often they will persist for hours, with crossing trails sometimes forming grid-like patterns that stretch from horizon to horizon. The chemtrails label is usually applied to these longer chemtrails, with their very persistence put forward as evidence that they cannot be normal contrails. But this is of course in direct contravention. We see contrails being formed on the backs of Formula One cars and Indy cars in damp conditions. We see them when jets land in foggy conditions. We can actually see them for real happening at low altitude because the atmospheric conditions have coordinated to enable us to see it. But that's just the same thing that's happening at high altitude. An aircraft is an aerodynamic device cutting through the air, and the air underneath the wings is traveling faster than the air over the wings. That's what allows it to fly. So therefore, at the end of the wings, there will be things called wake turbulence, vortices that form, which is why they fly planes 1 or 2 miles apart. It's because a large plane like a 747 could easily leave a wake that would disrupt a smaller plane or even a large plane like a 747. In fact, in Queens, a few days after 9/11, an Airbus jet crashed after flying through the wake turbulence of a 747. I think it was a Japan Airlines 747. It had taken off 2 or 3 minutes before. The Airbus flew into the wake turbulence, got a big shimmy on, and the pilot overcorrected by stamping on the, this was proven in the NTSB report, he stamped on the rudder pedal and the rudder broke off. So it wasn't entirely the wake turbulence, but the beginning of the accident, the primary cause of the accident was the plane flying through a 747's wake turbulence. And this was a big Airbus. This was not a little Cessna plane. So wake turbulence is a real thing. We know that. And it happens all the time. It's just a factor of aerodynamic travel. So to imagine that this somehow is evidence of a conspiracy is very, very weak by definition, because we know the real cause of what's happening. We know what it is already. There's no need for a superfluous explanation. Are chemtrails a new phenomenon? This is like one of the weirder aspects of it, because you can go and find photographs of pictures in 1931 and 1949 and 1963 and 1985 of planes leaving contrails in the sky, because once we pierce that altitude barrier where you have a lot of interaction with very, very sub-zero air when hot hydrocarbon exhaust gases, we saw that this was a phenomenon that was available. And you can just go and look at pictures. And I mean, my favorite one, I think I was listening, I think it might have been on Alex Jones. I don't remember there being chemtrails before 1995. I remember going out and seeing the sky and it was clear and there was no such thing. So, I mean, obviously because I don't remember, that means that, it must be a conspiracy theory. So, yeah, sure. Well, guess what, Alex Jones? I remember going out with my dad when I was about 5 years old and being in Montreal and seeing all kinds of contrails flying through the sky and pointing them out and remembering counting them with my father and having fun with him and, and not thinking it was some kind of crazy conspiracy theory. So there you go. So what can I say? Your memory is fallible, mine isn't. Testimony based on what you remember from 1996 is about as valuable as a screen door on a submarine. It's useless because it's all just conjecture. It's all based on Alex Jones's memory or a conspiracy theorist's memory, and that's not real evidence. Neither is the evidence that I just gave, that I used to count chemtrails with my dad, but I'm just pointing out the fact that I do, in fact, remember contrails in the sky before 1996. And I remember always having a fascination with aviation since I was a little kid. And therefore, bothering to do the research and finding out what aircraft do in the sky and how they operate and what makes them work. And once you do that, you can work out pretty easily that chemtrails are a load of old bollocks, shall we say. We can prove that contrails linger for a long time. Just look at World War II footage of big bombers flying through the air, and you can see the contrails lasting for a long time. And sometimes they do form this X pattern in the sky because planes cross over each other's flight paths all the time. Another reason that chemtrail sightings might have increased since 1995 is because air travel has, of course, increased since 1995. We fly more now than we've ever flown, billions and billions of miles every year, more and more planes, more and more airlines, discount airlines, high-end airlines, business-only airlines. All of these different things have happened in the last 25 years. So it is no surprise to me that there is now some sort of larger amount of contrails in the sky, and therefore, of course, a larger amount of chemtrails in the sky, because there are just more aircraft in the sky. That is without a doubt. We are actually at the point now with aircraft where we're trying to design autonomous aircraft, so we don't have to have these flight paths and these complicated things, because the skies are becoming too busy, because we fly planes on pre-prescribed corridors, because that is how humans interact with aircraft, and that's how we see them best. But if you leave it up to a computer, an autonomous computer that can fly the plane and control where they all are and keep them all 5 miles apart, there will be no need for these pre-prescribed flight paths. Planes will make their own flight plans in advance, dependent on other aircraft around them, much like autonomous cars, which are coming soon to a theatre near you. Do the math. I keep saying this, but do the math. Any chemicals sprayed at 30,000 feet would be so diluted by the time that they reach the ground, and there would be no way of judging where they would land and what target they would be hitting, because, as we all know, the wind velocity at high altitudes is incredibly high, and you don't know which direction it's travelling. It could be travelling in a completely different direction to the air underneath. So once you've deployed your payload over, let's say, Manitoba in Canada, you've deployed your payload, you've hit the corridor, you're flying in a pre-prescribed air corridor, and you've done that, and then suddenly the wind changes direction and all of your chemicals are blown up to the Arctic. What would be the point? How would you know? How would you know that you'd had a target hit? You wouldn't. Except by, of course, testing the ground, which we do every day. We test how much chemicals are in our dirt, how much chemicals are in our food, how much chemicals are in the atmosphere, in the dust that we breathe. We test these things every single day. People do it every day. But of course, these people are also all involved in the conspiracy. So every single atmospheric scientist, every person at NASA, every person flying an airplane, every person who owns an airline, every refueler, every fuel tester, every single ground crew, every single person loading cargo onto a plane, every single person that signs the dockets on what the cargo is going to be on the plane, the cargo manifest, the stewardesses, all of the people working for the airline, of course, they're all involved in the conspiracy. That's not, let alone the governments, let alone the organisation that it requires, let alone the hazmat teams that would need to be on the ground, let alone all the classified people who would need to be working behind the scenes to make this work, let alone all of those. You are talking about a conspiracy of literally millions of people. In fact, so many people would have to be involved in this conspiracy for it to work that you, in your day-to-day life, would probably meet 3 of them a day. Do the math. Every country in the world would have to be involved in this conspiracy. Every single one. Apart from Indonesia, because they're banned from flying in the continental United States. Every single airline would need to be involved. Every single world government would need to be involved. Now, look what's just happened in the EU. Britain, one country, has just left the EU, and it's plunged the other 26 countries into chaos. Does this look like we're working together on some grand plan for globalization? Does this look like we are on some organized, clandestine pathway towards secret technology which no one is telling us about? Or does it just look like a bunch of humans making decisions in their own best interests, and sometimes those interests crossing with the interests of others? I don't know. You tell me. The incognito infrastructure required to conceal the chemtrail conspiracy would dwarf any other governmental agency. Millions of people would be required to do this. Millions and millions. So, in conclusion, this is why the chemtrail theory doesn't hold up to reason or logic. I think the theory is cool. I love the idea of a nefarious government organization spraying us all with chemicals to subdue us or to reduce our population or to force us all to go and live in underground bunkers. I think that is a really cool idea for a science fiction book. I think it's a great idea for a TV series or even a movie, Poison Sky. I can see it. I can see a great film being made like that. But I don't see it as a real thing because the evidence would be people dying. And we are living in a time right now where people are living longer than they've ever lived. We're living in a time right now where people are better educated than they've ever been, where poverty has been reduced. If this government, this grand nefarious government scheme of the UN or whatever it was trying to reduce the global population, these things like Agenda 21, chemtrails, all of this kind of stuff would actually be happening. And it's not. We feed more people now than we've ever fed. People live longer than they've ever lived. So I don't understand. There's no logic. There's no final payoff for these guys. And also, of course, the biggest problem with the conspiracy theory is the people perpetrating this terrible crime would be perpetrating it upon themselves. Their children. How could they guarantee that their children at school in Oregon would not be sprayed by those chemicals that were dumped in Washington state? Because we don't know where the wind is going to go. We don't know what's going to happen. Are all these people living in some vast underground chamber somewhere waiting for the rest of the population to die? And as I said, when is that going to happen? There are a million ways they could kill us. And why wouldn't they just do it by putting it in the water? Oh, that's right, because they're already putting fluoride in the water, which is designed to kill us all as well. So all of these poisons are working against the human population, yet we can't explain the fact that human beings are probably healthier and more have longer lifespans than they have ever had. So how does that work? Explain that one to me. Because I don't see a correlation with the amount of chemicals being dumped by planes and the population of the Earth. There is no correlation. In fact, if anything, it's the complete opposite. The population of the Earth continues to grow and will probably hit about 10 billion by 2030. So, you know, we're kind of on the wrong path if we're trying to exterminate the human population or to decimate or to, you know, commit genocide or ecocide, or even terraforming, as I've heard some claim. But you know, this is just the vanguard for an alien invasion, which will be a completely separate video about whether we've been contacted by aliens and or whether they walk amongst us. The answer is no. So, in conclusion, chemtrail thinking fails on a basic level. It assumes a level of competence and a level of secret keeping that our government is incapable of. It shows that, you know, it imagines that the government or this, even, you know, this super government, this thing that's above all of our governments, the New World Order, is brilliant enough, clever enough, amazing enough to not just pull off this conspiracy, because this is the other problem with the whole thing, is usually people who are embedded into the chemtrail truth movement are embedded into the false flag, 9/11 truth, etc., movement. So it just tends to feed into their impersonal narrative, and you can't separate one from the other. And once you've opened that door, once you open the door to thinking that the government is spraying you with chemicals, and you buy that as fact without even thinking about it too hard, then you're wide open to any other kind of scientific misinterpretation. You're open to any stupid YouTube video, including mine, that would tell you that there were explosives placed in the World Trade Center. You know, a fact that's obviously impossible from the video evidence that we've seen, that the government is spraying people from 30,000 feet, somehow targeting people from 30,000 feet with chemicals that float down through the air. I mean, it boggles the mind, and it confounds the senses. And it's something that, as a population, we need to talk about why there is scientific illiteracy, why we have this fear of experts in our world, and what the dumbing down of real information means to all of us, to my nieces, and their future in this regressive world that we seem to be living in, where more and more people are believing in things that are not true. Because there used to be, in our population, there used to be a need for truth, the age of enlightenment, the time when we looked for knowledge and we believed that science was going to be the way to repair the world, and how we were going to get over this nonsense of religion and moving towards a more secular, humanist worldview as a population. And unfortunately, now we seem to be in a post-enlightenment world. We seem to be in a world where we don't want science to answer these questions. We just want the answer, and we don't want to know where it came from. And that's a very, very dangerous, dangerous world. And I think as a population, we need to ask ourselves some questions. So look, did you like the video? If you did, please hit like. If you really like me, please hit subscribe. And if you want to talk more about this, or you think that I'm talking out of my bum, or that I'm a brilliant genius and you cannot help but believe in my opinion, if you believe either of those things or anything in the middle, then please comment below. Let's get the conversation started. I'm going to be posting this video on my own channel and probably on a few chemtrail channels as well, so I'm sure to get a little bit of controversy and controversial opinions, but I'd really like to know what you think. So please like, subscribe, share, and have a great day. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget, Illuminati forever.